Let's look then at this agenda. So item 1, apologies for absence and chair's announcements. I've made one announcement already about varying business. So let's take apologies. I've got Navin Shah, apologies. We've got in attendance Assembly Member Tony Devonish and Caroline Pidgey. Let's move on. Is there any other apologies that we're aware of? Okay, let's then move on to declaration of interest. You've got officer advice before members. Can I ask you to note the list of officers held by Assembly members and declare any disclosable pecuniary interest in specific items listed on the agenda, or declare any other relevant interest? Are there any? No. Thank you very much. Moving on then, can we confirm item 3, the minutes of our meeting on the 31st of January 2018 to be signed by me as a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Can we note item 4, can we note the actions arising from our previous meetings?
Agreed.
Can we look at item 6? Is there any questions you want to raise to officers?
No.
We're asked to recommend to respond to the head of paid service on issues relating to this item. Are there any? No? Okay, thank you very much. Jeff Jacobs, that's the advice of this committee on that item. Moving on to item 7, action taken under delegated authority. I've got a long piece of spiel to read out here. So, the committee is recommended to note the recent action taken by me as chair of the GLA Oversight Committee under delegated authority following the consultation with the education panel, deputy chairman and party group lead members, namely to agree the response to the Department of Education's consultation on the evolution of the adult education budget, and notes the letter attached in Appendix 1 of the report. I want you to further note the action taken by the chair of the GLA Oversight Committee following consultation with the deputy chairman and the party group lead members, namely to send a letter to Sir Martin Moore-Bick, chairman of the Grenfell Tower Inquiry, setting out the findings from this committee's investigations regarding the Grenfell Tower fire, and that the committee notes the letter is attached in Appendix 2 to the report.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Then let's just deal with date of next meeting. You're asked to, the next scheduled meeting of this committee will be Tuesday the 20th of March 2018 at 2 p.m. in Committee Room 5. And then item 11, any other business that I consider urgent. There is no urgent any other business. We're now awaiting for our principal guest.
He's here. He's in the building.
Jennifer, find it.
No, could do item 7.
Item 7.
Because it wasn't here yet.
We've done that. I've done item 7. I read out. It was when I was reading.
Finance one.
Yeah, I've done item 6. The finance one.
Yeah, no, you jumped to item 9.
Ah, sorry. Item 7. Yeah. Sorry, I've just been corrected by Assembly Member Bacon, and rightly so. Can we just go back to item 7, changes to GLA establishment, finance and governance? Is there any questions that you want to raise to Martin Clark, who is busily walking down the gallery to join us at the table? Sorry about that. Apologies. In my ace to get through the business. Assembly Member Bacon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Mr. Clark, sorry to rush you down here.
Okay.
Just a couple of questions. The restructuring that you're proposing seems very straightforward and sensible. You forecast, what you've actually said is financial savings in the order of 120,000 per annum are expected to arise. Any reason why they wouldn't arise?
Only some of the posts are subject to evaluation, you know. So I can't guarantee it.
Okay.
So a grade could be one either side.
We don't expect it to cost us anymore, basically.
No, exactly.
I'm
certainly expecting it's about order of magnitude saving.
Okay. The only other question I was going to ask is about the apprentices, which we've got here working under contract from SITFA, and it looks like we're taking those on permanently at grade 4. we will obviously then incur the cost. Are these people studying for SIPFA, or are they just employed by SIPFA?
Yes, as part of it is that they go through the accounting technicians and then through, you know, to the,
So they're doing
they can progress to the full
So they're doing
qualification.
AAT at the moment, and then they, subject to them passing that satisfactorily,
Exactly.
they then go on to SIPFA.
So
And we would pick up the cost of the training programme for that.
the training programme is covered by the apprenticeship levy while they're apprentices.
Yep.
And then, yes.
When they
so,
progress beyond that.
yes. So the final stage, we would have to meet
that's
special
fine.
qualification costs.
Good. I was hoping you would say that. That's all I wanted to ask, Chairman. I'm happy with the report.
Okay, any other colleagues that wish to make a contribution? Okay, can we thank you for that, and can we then note the report? Thank you very much. Thank you. Our guest is literally walking down somewhere in the building, 2 minutes away. 2 minutes away. So I suggest we don't adjourn.
Doesn't know the way.
Never been in this building before.
It's just a bit like, you know that show Take Me Out?
No.
You don't know
Tell
Take
us
Me
what,
Out?
I've heard of it. I don't know what
Take Me Out, so they arrive, they come down there. It's a dating show.
This is it. It's just the Boris bit.
a dating show. I don't think I
It's like Take Me Out. You know. Down you come.
Just should just warn the members, your mics are on and can be heard by members in the gallery and probably on the webcast.
I'd be on the transcript.
So you might not wish to make the statements that you would like to make.
That Boris Johnson, he's a brilliant bloke, isn't he?
Yeah.
So sorry I'm late.
You're not late, Foreign Secretary.
Good
Make
afternoon.
yourself comfortable.
Thank you so much.
Can I welcome you to this session? It's relating to the Garden Bridge. We have given you some background information. I think we provided to your office both in electronic form and as well as this ring binder in front of me. So that was all the material we think are the questions that are going to be asked this afternoon. So just to make sure that you're aware of that, I'm just going to do a quick opening statement, setting the scene, and then we're going to go into straight onto questions. We've got roughly about 45 minutes for this. I have suggested to you that that if you wish to make a statement, we'd take it at the end. And of course, if there are further questions, that we just might, if we don't cover all the topics, we might write to you and give you a further opportunity to clarify issues, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Let's then move on then. So in terms of my opening statement, in 2013, the then Mayor proposed a 366-metre pedestrian bridge spanning the Thames. The intention was for the construction and future maintenance of the bridge to be the responsibility of a charity, the Garden Bridge Trust, funded by the Transport of London and Department of Transport and private donations. The unusual way the bridge was conceived and procured brought it to the attention of individual Assembly members at the time and the media, and resulted in a significant amount of community concern. As time went on, the then Mayor, Boris Johnson, had to accept a number of open-ended commitments and underwritings from revenue costs imposed by various planning authorities to do with the bridge. The committee conducted a thorough investigation into how the bridge's design was procured in March 2016. We found serious errors in the procurement process that compromised its objectivity and fairness. We found that the former mayor should have been far more upfront about the nature of contacts between the senior team and Heatherwick's studio, and we suggested reimbursing the unsuccessful bidders at the time. It was as a result of our investigation and our further scrutiny into TfL procedures that TfL admitted their failure in meeting their expected standards and have subsequently taken a series of actions to make their processes more open and transparent. The new mayor, after initially supporting the Garden Bridge project, faced numerous questions from the Assembly and others about the ongoing financial viability of the bridge. As a result, he commissioned an independent review published in April 2017 and then withdrew his support from the Garden Bridge the following month, May 2017, after it became clear that escalating capital and revenue costs were increasing the risk to taxpayers. The former Mayor, Boris Johnson, chose not to take part in the review, but some of his political advisers and other senior officials and other stakeholders to do with the project did. Today, we will hear from the former Mayor at the time, the purpose of which is to put the outstanding issues relating to about accountability about some of these issues of the project, but also to ensure lessons are learned for future decision making here at City Hall. So accordingly, we've structured the session into three parts: accountability, TfL governance and procurement, and then lessons learned for the organisations. Hopefully we can deal with all members' questions if we have time for it. So, if I can begin, Foreign Secretary, would you agree with me that when taxpayers' money is being spent in London on GLA and TfL projects, ultimately the way the money is allocated and spent is the responsibility of the Mayor in post?
I absolutely agree with that, Mr. Duval. And can I just begin by saying to you and to your committee today what a pleasure it is to be back here, and also how seriously I take the work that you do. And I know that you in the Assembly have been examining the Garden Bridge project intermittently for quite some time. And I remember myself coming to talk to you about it in the past. And it is indeed thoroughly right that the expenditure of taxpayers' money in our city should be properly invigilated. And I think that on the whole, the GLA has done an excellent job of doing that. What I would say is that my view is it was an excellent project. I began actually by being rather sceptical about it when it was first presented to me, because I was aware of the difficulty of delivering this kind of thing, the political push you have to give to get something like this done. I think I may have pointed out to you before. But it would meet some important needs. It would be a fantastic amenity in the middle of the city, an unexpected park in the middle of the river. It does satisfy various transport needs, connecting Waterloo with the Aldwych Covent Garden area, both areas in need of regeneration. And I think it would have been a great thing for London. That's why I think it was right to spend public money on it. Both I and the former Chancellor, George Osborne, saw the merit of the scheme, and we wanted to get it going. And it was absolutely true that it's a bitter disappointment to me now that it is no longer proceeding. I have to say that that's not the decision I would have taken were I still doing the job I once did. I think that when I left office, what had happened, roughly speaking, was that about 37 million pounds had been spent, something of that order. My successor came into office, as the committee knows, and decided, I think, reversed his initial hostility to the bridge and decided he was actually going to support it, but never really gave it the political push that it needed. And as time went on, he, I think, it'd be fair to say, blew hot and cold about it, and when it came to it, I think, didn't feel that he really wanted to deliver the project for one reason or another. And in the interim, further cost was racked up of about £9 million, I believe. So, since the new mayor, since Sadiq Khan came in to office, a further £9 million was racked up during a period of sort of indecision. I mean, the worst thing you can do really with something like that is not make up your mind, be warm towards it one day, then listen to the sceptics the other day. To get anything done in London, you've got to push and really believe in it. And I think by the end, he, as I understand it, he just decided that it was sort of not invented here, not his baby, and it was very sad. And so further cost was racked up. It came in the end. I think that the bill is about 46 million pounds, and that is a great shame. If you ask me now to say who should the mayor be accountable for that expenditure? Yes, the mayor certainly should be accountable for that expenditure. Had I gone on, was I still, were I still Mayor of London, I would certainly have continued with that project, and that would not have been money down the drain. Alas, for now it is, until such time, of course, as someone comes to the rescue of the project and revives it.
Sorry, it's Foreign Secretary. I should correct myself. It's so easy to fall into that trap as you were going on. We're going to come to talk about money later on, and of course, all mayors should be able to account. We're very interested in the bits that you were responsible under your watch. We're looking at the evidence that's been presented to us and to others. So it's good to know that you take full responsibility for the money. And as I've said, we've got some questions around the money aspects later on.
I take responsibility for the money that was spent on my watch.
On your watch, that's right. So that's the 46 million.
No, because a considerable sum was spent after I left office.
Oh, right, okay. Well, no doubt you'll elaborate that further. That's interesting to
I
us.
think I just pointed that out there.
So what do you think is the further bit that's...
I think about 9 million so far.
Okay.
But I'm afraid that bill may
Well, we'll get
may
to the
rise
bottom of that.
depending on
We'll get to the bottom of that.
on the cost of the dissolution of the trust and other things.
Okay. So but you do agree that politicians should be accountable for the decisions they make after they've left office?
Yes, and that's why I'm very happy to be here, and I think it's very important that people, you know, it may be that in the course of this conversation, I'm unable to satisfy you on particular details, but the best of my ability, I will try to answer to your questions about what we were doing with the Garden Bridge.
I wouldn't wish to mislead anyone, Mr. Johnson. I know we're all happy that you're here, but you've been summoned here. It's not voluntary that you're before us. There is some legal underpinning of why you've been brought back. So I wouldn't wish to mislead anybody in the room.
I didn't, nor did I wish to minimise the plenipotentiary powers that you hold, Mr. Duval, nor my trepidation in appearing before this group, who are far more forensic and savage, I may say, in their elenchus than people I've met down the river.
So why then did you not participate in the Margaret Hodge review when others did, of your senior political advisors and others at the Garden Bridge Trust? Why did you think you were different from them?
I thank and congratulate all those who've tried to shed light on what went on. I believe that those officials, Richard Kenai, Isabel Dedring, they have absolutely nothing to hide, everything to be proud of in what they did. I did. It's absolutely true. I did get a summons or a request. I think probably not a summons, but a request from Dame Margaret, for whom I have the highest regard. But I have to say, I found her request a bit odd and a bit curiously framed, because her inquiry seemed to have no very obvious statutory purpose or ambition, except that it had been commissioned at the behest of the mayor. And indeed, as time went on, it was obvious that there were certain peculiarities about this process. People who submitted to her inquiries were not shown documents in advance. There was all sorts of confusion about the transcripts and what had actually been said in the inquiry. And I'm afraid Dame Margaret ended up having to apologise for the unorthodox circumstances in which her inquiry was conducted. I think she had held it in her own rooms in the House of Commons, for which she had to apologise to the Commons authorities. So it was a I mean, I don't be ashamed, it was a fairly gimcrack affair, her inquiry, unlike the Garden Bridge, of course, which would have been a beautiful piece of engineering and stood the test of time. But that's alas why I felt it wasn't really necessary for me to be there.
Well, like I said, we're very glad that you're here, albeit that we've had to, it is by summonsing you here in terms of some of the issues that we're dealing with on the Garden Bridge project. Let's go back to the very beginning then. Can we just have a real honest conversation here? Right from the beginning, it was always going to be a garden bridge. Is that correct? All the evidence says, everything that we've heard, says that right from the beginning you were very clear that this was always going to be a garden bridge that you wanted. There was never any other type of questioning of a different type of bridge.
Well, I think we talked about this before once, and to the best of my recollection, what happened was that after the Olympics, at some stage, Joanna Lumley and Thomas Heatherwick had a meeting with Eddie Lister and others, possibly, and they pitched this project. They then, I think Eddie quite liked it. At a certain stage, they came to me in the office upstairs, and we had a conversation about it. And I think at some stage a model was produced. And as I said, I was a bit sceptical about it, even though Isabel liked it, because I just thought, this is going to, getting something built across the Thames. I mean, the difficulties with the Port of London Authority, with the boroughs, with everybody, actually getting the permissions to do something like that. Everybody knows it's grindingly hard. And so I said, this could be just exhausting, an exhausting political project where we want to do loads of other things as well. And in the end, I was persuaded to go along with it, really because talking to TfL, talking to our experts about it, there did seem to be a transport case. You move people, loads of people come out of Waterloo Station, they want to cross the river, they file like the hordes in T.S. Eliot over Waterloo Bridge. They could do this beautiful journey across a new garden bridge, plus you'd have a fantastic park, plus if you change the Aldwych gyratory and stuff, you'd have some real regeneration there. It did make sense. It had a good business case. So I got into it. We then, just to get to your point, sorry, yeah. Mr. Duval. We then had we then realised that, as you say, there was an issue. If we wanted to go ahead with it, we had to procure it properly. We had to find a way forward, and as you know, there are very strict rules about how that can be done, and so it was necessary to have a procurement process and a competition. And we genuinely did that in a spirit of absolute openness, as I think Richard, Decana and others have said to you on many occasions. And there were, to the best of my knowledge, there were three competitors. There was Marks Barfield, Air and Spotterswood. Wilkinson Air.
We're going to cover procurement, but I would stress the evidence and the facts relating to that procurement process. I don't want to cut your fire. It doesn't really, the way you're opening up.
I know you've been very critical of it. I know you've been very critical of it.
It's not me being critical, Foreign Secretary. It's the evidence and the facts. Okay. Let's go back. So we've got a 12-page briefing note on the Garden Bridge internally. TfL, long before we even get into the tendering process, that's marked draft and confidential. It's released under an FOI arrangement, circulated to TfL's most senior management. It states, the designer Thomas Heatherwick, supported by the actress Joanna Lumley, has proposed a new footbridge in central London connecting Temple to the South Bank. The bridge would be highly sculptural with columns in the River Thames supporting the structure. The Mayor is extremely supportive of the need for additional footbridges across the Thames and is keen for TfL to support this proposal. No other alternative proposals are mentioned in the note. So that, in establishing that it's a garden bridge that we're looking at and going through on that, there are some other issues. So this is right at the very beginnings of this proposal, before you even enter into tendering, before the tendering issues come. And I know you've been asked questions before, but we've got at least 8, probably more, 8 substantial meetings taking place with the promoters of this project before any specs, any tender documents are promoted. And quite clearly then, do you not accept that maybe that some of those meetings, we can talk about San Francisco. We've had so many versions, Mr. Mayor, of that trip to San Francisco from you, and that you've given to others. What is the true version of it that when you last come back before this committee, I can remember you saying then, but then subsequently I heard a different version you said to Nick Ferrari on an LBC interview.
Right.
So, you know, what are we to make of
Trip to San Francisco.
these meetings,
Okay.
dialogues, before any formal procurement is undertaken by Transport for London?
Well, Len, let me deal with the two things in order, and I think that the two substantive questions. There's a basic, obviously, when somebody comes to a public body with an idea for a new transport project, whatever it, or a new infrastructure project, whatever it may be. Suppose it's the promoters of a new channel tunnel or whatever. They will represent a particular point of view, a particular ambition. The M25, all these, even Crossrail actually was in the beginning. Crossrail was the brainchild of a small group of devoted railway enthusiasts who wanted to get it done. And so you go to the public body and you try and get your idea adopted, and that's an inevitable part of the process of anything happening in our city. It's just how it works. The question then is, how do the authorities try to make sure that there's a proper process for procurement, and we'll come on to that later. So I just wanted to explain the background to how the Garden Bridge
Can I just
project
put
arose. On your second question, which was about the fabled trip to San Francisco, on which I have reported to you and to the Assembly several times already. The ambition was to secure considerable sums of sponsorship, not just for the Garden Bridge, but for other projects in London. And to the best of my knowledge, some of those projects are still ongoing. And I think they're a very good idea. I will say parenthetically that I think it's a great thing for a mayor to go out there and hustle and try and get private sponsorship for things. And I'm proud to say, when I was Mayor of London, we not only cut crime by about 20%, unlike what's happening now, we not only built 100,000 homes, we not only had the biggest investment in public transport for a generation, but we secured more than 100 million, if you add the bikes, the cable car, what we had for Team
Don't
London.
mention the cable
Yes,
car.
that was 30 million.
First
30
It was
million.
European money, wasn't it, as well?
Some of it was, some of it was. So I'm very delighted to have it back. But some of it came from Member Seller.
I want to bring you
quite
back.
right too. More than 100 million pounds. And I would like to know what you're doing to interrogate the current incumbent about what efforts he is making to secure private funding.
Foreign Secretary, this is very good and all good brick and back, but that's not what this is about. Let's focus back in to the Garden Bridge and back to the evidence. So can I put to you, because one of the issues is all these 8 meetings, all the issues of San Francisco, is you're not passively being lobbied by promoters of the Garden Bridge. You are effectively become and co-opted as a champion before the procurement exercise has taken place. And that some of the people that you are meeting with have benefited from that procurement process. That's the issue about the relationship that I'm asking you about. Did you stop, as you eloquently described, of being lobbied for great projects, which is what mayors do, and when is the appropriate time to champion a project? At this point, you were being advised by TfL at the time of the San Francisco trip to keep your distance from Thomas Everwick. You were being advised. That's here. There are TfL officials saying we were advising the mayor to do it. One asked the question, why was the San Francisco trip a GLA trip and not a TfL trip if the Garden Bridge is? You've said there are other projects. We've not seen the evidence of that, but we take your word on those issues. But that's what we're trying to say. Did we get that bit wrong? Do you not think so? Do you think there was a... Because if the case that we'd started to argue for a Garden Bridge project, why on earth, as we moved into procurement, we're still procuring a pedestrian bridge with TfL officials saying, no, it's not a Garden Bridge project.
Right.
So what's the confusion? Why are we creating confusion?
I think you have to understand that there's inevitably, when you want a greater... it's a reasonable question. But inevitably, when you want to get a great project off the ground, and you need private sponsorship, there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, because without a vision and without somebody who can expound the idea, nobody's going to put their hands into their pockets. And of course, if nobody puts their hands into their pockets, you'll never get the idea off the ground. So the role of Joanna Lumley and Heather Wick, as I recall, at that stage, was simply to be champions for the concept. And a very good concept it was, a wonderful new piece of connectivity across the river. And what we were seeking to do was to use their eloquence and passion to get sponsors to say, wow, that sounds great. We then, obviously, as TfL rightly advised, had to make sure that we had an arm's length process to do the procurement properly.
Well, let's move into procurement. Sean, Assembly Member Sean Berry.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I mean, I'd ask my second question first, I think, probably, because I hope you'd agree that transport investment decisions, they need to be objective. They shouldn't be about wow, they should be about fulfilling a transport need that is there. You've described it as a park in the middle of the river. You said it would satisfy transport needs, but that's not the same thing as fulfilling transport goals. So can I ask how and when in the process did you come to the conclusion that it was a transport project that needed transport investment money?
Actually, as I said in my Sean, nice to see you again. As I said in my opening remarks, I said that my anxiety about it wasn't really the business case, wasn't really the amenity, wasn't the connectivity that it provided. My anxiety about the bridge was just the sheer hassle factor of trying to deliver such a thing and to get the planning consents, as they eventually did, every single one, and to get everybody to agree with it. That was always going to be the difficulty. But once I got the bug, I could see that it could be a fantastic project, and the beauty of it, I think, is that it does connect these two areas that on both sides, both banks of the river, are in need of some regeneration. It makes landfall in very good places on either side to drive regeneration and growth. You can do things, as I said, in the Aldwych area by changing the gyratory to make it much more attractive, and that would work with the landfall site of the Garden Bridge. And so just in terms of the transport need, it was very conspicuous. It was to enable people to have a beautiful walk, one way or the other, either to Waterloo or to Covent Garden, and to simultaneously to increase the offer of the city. London is the greatest city on earth, as I never used to tire of telling you. But a great city cannot rest on its laurels. You have to keep refreshing things.
People agree on that. I mean, but what you're saying there,
and the Garden Bridge is a great way of doing it.
in terms of what you're saying there about the transport objectives, the transport benefits it would bring, they all sound very post hoc to me, as in you've applied them to it after you've decided you want a garden bridge. And I think that's the problem. If it's a transport project getting transport investment, shouldn't the options have been opened up to, say, other modes of transport? I think my question really is do you think that your public support, your decision that it's a bridge with a garden on it, does that mean it was impossible for the other potential bidders, other potential designs, other potential modes of transport to get a look in during the procurement process?
No, I think it was genuinely open to people to come up with beautiful schemes for a new footbridge across the Thames in that place, or a new. I think Wilkinson and Eyre did a fantastic job with the cable car, which seems to attract some hysteria from the audience. It was a wonderful project, and Mark Barfield did the London Eye. They're very reputable people. We were very interested in what they had to say. If I just may contrast the Garden Bridge project, which actually Peter Hendy would tell you had an excellent business case with another transport scheme. He would. If you look at the...
Stick to the facts, Mr. Mayor. If you read his testament, if
what
you
he told me last night.
If you read his transcript, Margaret Hodgson doesn't speak as in the way that I think you want this committee to.
Well, okay. Well, perhaps you could. I spoke to him about this very matter last night. Such was my anxiety to refresh my memory about this. I talked to Peter, for whom, as you know, I have a very high regard. And has been a great servant of the city, and he told me he thought it was a great scheme and would have had a much better transport case, Sean, than the what I understand is a scheme that we also looked at.
Yeah, and he said in his transcript that he was bloody raging. That's what he said.
A footbridge at Rotherhithe, which would have to go enormously high and would cost £200 million, for which not a penny of private sponsorship is invited. Am I correct that this is being envisaged by the current mayor?
Can we stick to
is that right? Is he going to spend 200 million quid? 200 million quid, so pure taxpayers' money on a footbridge.
I need to draw you back on that.
No case, whatever.
There will be future meetings about that project, but that's in the future.
Power to your elbow,
that's in the future.
You know
I'm
I'm
very
backing
glad
you.
that you'll be supportive of me.
You know I'm
in
backing
asking those
you.
questions,
I don't wish to blight
and
you.
I will be prepared to ask those questions if the evidence says that. And the reason why we're talking to you today is the evidence is actually contradicting some of what you're saying. So, Assembly Member Berry, continue.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not reassured by that. I'm not hearing words that are the kinds of language you'd expect to be talked about when you're considering transport investment decisions. I asked for objectivity and I didn't get any of that back. The people employed to do that are the TfL board. They're the ones making the investment decisions, looking at the strategic needs of London. Why did you keep the TfL board at arm's length throughout this project?
So I'm slightly confused about at one stage you accuse me of trying to manipulate TfL, and you're saying I'm keeping them at arm's length. What's
TfL's board, who seem not to have heard about this at all.
Okay, so let's...
I see the board.
Yes.
I will happily get back to the committee if my memory is playing me false in this, but I have no doubt that the board was kept abreast of.
We've got a letter from the current Commissioner for Transport that says, we've implemented significant changes to our board and committee structure. We've created a Programmes and Investment Committee specifically to focus on our investment programme and give us an appropriate level of detailed attention. That's as a result of the failings that there were in keeping the board informed on this scheme.
As you know, Sean, the TfL board. Some people sometimes have said there's an element of North Korea about the TfL board, and I would deprecate any such suggestion. They are an extremely active and forensic bunch of scrutineers, and if they had missed the expenditure on the Garden Bridge, I would be very surprised indeed.
Okay, look, can I come in? The facts are that TfL board didn't receive reports, and that's been vindicated by Mike Brown, I think Peter Endy in some issues, and various other bits of information that's been supplied. Again, some of that will be FOIable, some of that is information that's supplied. So can I just come in? On the procurement issues, Mr. Mayor, is look, it really just to get, we've had this before, but let's go for the record, right? So, do you think it's right during a procurement process that an internal report that actually looks at its failings is then changed at the front and at the back, the conclusions and the beginnings, which is the only bit to ever become public and published on a TfL website, given a completely misleading position of what's in the body of the internal report? Is that appropriate that TfL officials should be doing in a procurement policy? I've got some other questions to add on. Should officers, and there is evidence around this, should officers be approaching one of the participants in a future procurement exercise and asking them what type of procurement process they would like? Right? There's evidence to suggest that. Would you think that's good practice, and you should?
Sorry, Len, can I just interrupt you there? Could you give me chapter and verse on that?
There was one of the officials, there's email traffic in terms of all this information, where one of the officials says, I approached Thomas Everwick today and asked him what type of procurement exercise he would like TfL to undertake. No other people that were approached to participate in that tendering exercise were ever given that opportunity. Right, would you then accept Ernst & Young, the internal auditors, which you know I've been critical of, then produce a piece of work that say that the actual process of procuring both for Thomas Everwick's aspect of the work and the ERUP, which we did not, Foreign Secretary, did not look into, and I wish we did at the time, that actually there were problems with those processes. Hence why...
Sorry, did you say Arup, you mean?
Arup,
Yeah.
sorry. Hence why Assembly Member Berry is asking those questions about, do you think this process was fair, open and honest, and would you stand by some of the things that I've said? Do you think it's appropriate or not appropriate?
I mean, first of all, Len, on the audits, as you know, this has been one of the most super masticated pieces of public expenditure in London history. We've had an internal audit report, an external auditor review, the Charity Commission review of the Garden Bridge Trust, an investigation by the National Audit Office, and the work of Dame Margaret Hodge, to say nothing of the work that has been conducted by your excellent committees and the Assembly itself. And yes, I think from memory, most people at TfL who were involved in it might say that there were bits and pieces that were rough around the edges in the way that it was done, but that was because of the speed with which it was necessary to get it done. And in the end, there was nothing that they felt substantially vitiated their work or in any way invalidated the outcome. And that was why I think the audit report was that you described was topped and tailed in the way that it was. So that's the answer to your first point. On your question about the officers and the email traffic, I'm afraid I'm not. I mean, I haven't seen that traffic, but I would be very, very. I just want to make a general point because this goes to I think a lot of the commentary that has been about the Garden Bridge and about GLA officers, TfL officers who were involved in it. And I have to say that some of the stuff that has been said and has been written about those individuals and the calumnies that have been levelled against them and the abuse that they have suffered for being public-spirited people who are simply doing their job and the insinuations that they have been in some way corrupt in the way they have behaved is absolutely reprehensible. And if I may say to you, Len, for whom I have a very high respect, I have to say that it is not, in my view, the job of the London Assembly to allow officials in TfL, hard-working, honourable people, to be subjected to that kind of abuse. And on the contrary, I believe it is the job of the London Assembly to protect such officials,
but
to protect them from the kind of abuse that they have suffered. And I'm going to single, there's one gentleman in particular whose reputation has been continuously attacked, and we know who it is, Richard de Caney. I think many people round this horseshoe will remember Richard, the work he did, what an effective officer he was, and he has been frankly vilified, and I think in a wholly unappealing and inaccurate way. And I'm given to understand.
I need to stop you there because there are actions undertaken by a number of people that are questionable.
Well,
and where
if you're saying that Richard has...
Where they're questionable, then that actually officers should be held to account. TfL broke their own policies and procedures in this tendering process. No, you're shaking your head, Foreign Secretary. The evidence of everyone, including, issues around this project. You quoted great bodies of people that have looked at it. The National Audit Office looked at this project and saw the inherent risks. Going back to the internal audit reports, they say TfL failed. The greatest evidence to suggest they failed is why do they say, and according to Mike Brown, have made changes on the back of the work relating to this project, this procurement exercise. They've changed their procedures. They've changed them. That's the evidence we gave you. That's what we
I
asked you
see-
to consider,
what I
including
observe.
Mike Brown's letter. But let's
I
move
understand
on.
that.
Let's
I
move on. Let's move on.
What I observe is
I
that the
agree
new
with
commissioner has
you
written a letter to the new
about
mayor.
Officers being questioned, but it's where their actions are clear and where there is evidence base, then they have to be accountable like politicians.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. But I think there's a line that should not be crossed. And I think the allegations of corruption, the insinuations, have been really quite horrendous. And they've been connived at in a journal, I think the Architect's Journal, which has published a stream of abuse of these individuals, as I understand it. And I think that, which is motivated, to the best of my knowledge, by a dislike that the Architect's Journal has, or the journalist concerned, for Thomas Heatherwick, who is not conceived of as being a proper architect, and is therefore somehow worthy of abuse.
We've not made those issues. I
Well,
think you've made your valid point.
I
We
think
need
it's
to
been a
move
very
on.
unhappy episode.
We need to, but I think there are issues in the way this project has come about that has allowed some of those accusations to be made. Could that not, and maybe that's an issue that you need to reflect on, could that have been minimised in some ways? Let's move on and move to Tom Copley around the deed of grant issues.
Thank you, Chair. Foreign Secretary, at the beginning of the meeting, you told us that you felt that you were responsible for how taxpayer money was spent when you were Mayor of London, and now we want to hear a bit more about how you exercised that responsibility and some of the decisions that you took. So, Foreign Secretary, by the time you left City Hall, the capital and revenue costs of the bridge were spiralling. You didn't have the land or implementable planning permission to start building. Did nobody advise you that the project was in such dire straits?
Actually, Mr. Copley, as you know very well, the Garden Bridge Trust, in the end, at the time when they were so wrongly and so short-sightedly deprived of further political support and were unable to continue their work, they'd secured virtually every relevant planning
I just want to know,
and they would have gone on to do a fantastic job. They'd raised about 70 or 80 million pounds in private sponsorship, and it would have been a great triumph for this city, and I think it's very regrettable.
You hadn't secured the land, you hadn't got implementable planning permission because the conditions had not been met and the cost of the bridge was increasing. Were you being advised that the bridge was in trouble?
Best of my knowledge, I was being advised that the bridge was a great project, and indeed, if your point is that we should have pulled the plug on it because it was not going to secure the planning permissions, I think I've answered that, because the bridge then did go on to secure all the relevant planning permissions and was in great shape. The only thing it needed one thing, and you know what it was.
It needed one thing. The land on the south bank of the Thames, Mr. Mayor. That is a fact. It's in the evidence here. You never secured the land on the south bank of the Thames, and you never satisfied all the planning conditions. So that was clear.
No, it's not clear.
It's absolutely clear.
They had all the relevant planning. Such as my determination to, as I say, to refresh my memory about this issue that I took the trouble to talk to the Garden Bridge Trust. They had all the relevant planning permissions.
You should be talking to Coin Street, because they certainly hadn't signed over. They certainly hadn't agreed to release. They hadn't agreed to release the land, Mr. Mayor. The bridge was in trouble. The bridge was in trouble. Foreign Secretary, in spring 2016.
What? Sorry, are you saying the bridge was in trouble
when you left office? The bridge was in trouble.
But they then subsequently they were not in trouble.
No.
But they subsequently did a deal to get all the relevant. They did. They were there.
No, Mr. Mayor. The planning conditions were never met. In spring 2016, it wasn't done. It wasn't done. You clearly have a misapprehension about this one, Mr. Mayor. In spring 2016...
Sorry, the Garden Bridge Trust tell us it wasn't done.
Yeah.
In their evidence to Margaret Hodge, there were a number of issues. They were getting in trouble over sponsorship. They were getting in trouble in terms of cash flow, hence some of your actions later on. But they hadn't secured... That was the reason why they did the construction contract, but they never put a spade in the ground or whatever they do in rivers to build bridges. So the question, that's where I think the evidence is that says they were in trouble, and whether you pulled the plug or a pause for thought about the risk of further public money.
Okay, if I may say so, not only did I not think it was worth pulling the plug then, nor did my successor, who continued to invest in the project and who said repeatedly that he had changed his mind about it, and that the Garden Bridge, he said, could rival New York's High Line, he said on 18th of May 2016, when he was no doubt in full possession of all the facts that Mr. Copley alludes to. He said that it was quite clearly in London taxpayers' financial interest to complete the Garden Bridge project. I'm quoting a gentleman called Mr. Sadiq Khan, who you may have come across on the 8th floor, on the 25th of May 2016. So, great guy, isn't he? Is he right? You know, whatever views you may ascribe to me about the wisdom of completing the project, and I think it was right, by the way, to continue with the project. They were amply shared by the succeeding Mayor of London, who continually told people, and I think I was told by the Garden Bridge Trust, that they had a sort of
we're here to talk about your time as
moment.
Mayor, I'm afraid, Mr. Foreign Secretary. In spring 2016, Lord Ahmed, the Transport Minister, wrote to you saying that he would raise the cap on pre-construction activities, resulting in the release of £7 million in capital funding. But you and your advisers knew that a number of conditions in the deed of grant between TfL and the Garden Bridge Trust had not been met. For example, the Trust did not secured the funding for the operation and maintenance of the bridge for the first 5 years. Is this why you chose to move the goalposts, signing a second mayoral decision in April 2016, which watered down the condition attached to the mayoral guarantee?
I mean, on the deed of grant, Mr. Copley, I have before me the letter from Mike Brown, pointing out that when Paul Morell wrote to him on the 27th of January 2016 to Richard Decaney, Managing Director of Planning, and the name TfL representative under the deed of grant, to request the release of the extra £7 million payment. We considered the evidence supplied in this letter, as well as the wider information we had available on the status of the project from our regular meetings with the Trust, and determined that the conditions of payment had been met, and it was necessary to release the payment.
The letter from Paul Morell. Except, of course, the conditions hadn't been met, had they, Mr. Mayor? Because one of the conditions in the deed of grant was that the Garden Bridge Trust had secured the funding for the operation and maintenance of the bridge for the first 5 years. That is in the deed of grant. We wish, you know. They had not satisfied that condition, had they, Mr. Mayor?
I must, with great
Mr. Foreign Secretary, I should say.
No, I
Old
can't
habits.
tell you how much it pleases me.
Foreign Secretary.
I can't tell you how much it pleases me to be referred to continually as Mr. Mayor. But I don't want to luxuriate in that. Golden moment. I know.
Greatest mayor in the history.
Ils sont passés ces beaux jours.
Foreign Secretary, stop the waffle, please. They hadn't secured funding for the 5 years of operation of the bridge, had they?
Mr. Copley, all I can do is refer you to Mike Brown's letter. They believed that TfL believed that the conditions for the deed of grant had been met.
But they hadn't secured funding for the first 5 years of operation, had they?
You asked about the conditions for the deed of grant, and Mike Brown believed that the conditions had been met.
If they had been met, why then did you sign a second mayoral direction in April 2016, softening the language, saying that they only needed to have a satisfactory funding strategy in place? Why the need to move the goalposts?
As I say, the conditions had been met, and that was why the funding was released.
Then why did you sign a mayoral decision in April 2016, moving the goalposts and watering down one of the conditions? If it had been met, why did you need to water it down?
Put down the goalposts.
Up to your old tricks. You watered down one of the conditions, Foreign Secretary.
The honest answer, Mr. Copley, is that you asked me something that I'm afraid I simply don't have. At this distance in time, I was prepared to answer a question about the deed of grant. I see from the letter from Mike Brown that the conditions for the payment of the deed of grant had been met. I would further just advise you.
This is a very
I would further
important point.
advise you that the subsequent mayor.
No, we're not here to talk about the subsequent mayor. We're here to talk about, sadly, we're here to
determined that it
talk
was still
about you,
worth
Mr.
investing.
Mayor.
So you asked the question why?
Foreign Secretary.
Why did
The
you,
answer-
why,
the
Foreign
answer to
Secretary,
why.
did
Let me
you
give you the answer
sign a
why.
second mayoral guarantee which
Okay.
watered down the condition that the
okay.
Garden Bridge Trust had to meet?
I don't for a minute accept the characterisation that you've made of whatever letter that I may have signed. I will certainly study it.
Did sign
get
it.
back to you. I will study it and I'll get back to you. But and as for my motives at the time, all I can say is they may very well have been the same as the motives of the current mayor.
No, we're
when
not
he
here to talk
said,
about the current mayor,
that the
Foreign
Garden
Secretary.
Bridge
We're here to
was a
talk-
project
we're here-
to rival New
we're here
York's
to talk
High
about
Line,
the decisions
and he
that
should certainly
you-
proceed with it.
We're here to talk about
that at this distance in time is the closest I can get
We're here
to
to talk
analysing
about-
my motives.
We're here to talk about the decisions that you made,
And
which have resulted in taxpayers' money being wasted
No.
on this project.
No, that's not true.
That's a very
No,
serious
not a single
matter.
penny of taxpayers' money
Very
has been wasted
serious
by me.
matter, Foreign Secretary.
No, not a single penny of
This is-
taxpayers' money.
this is-
You listen to me. Not a single penny of taxpayers' money has been wasted by me. It has been wasted by the current mayor of London, who cancelled the project completely unnecessarily,
Secretary,
having previously
it is
given the
because
impression
of your,
that he
it is
supported.
because of your decisions when you were mayor of London that we have ended up with this loss of taxpayers' money. And the questions I'm asking you now are about why you moved the goalposts to create a situation where this money was able to be wasted. So I ask you again, why did you sign another mayoral decision which watered down the conditions that the trust had to meet to secure more taxpayer money? Why? I just want to know why you did that.
If I can, perhaps with great respect to you, Mr. Copley, revert to the answer I gave to the question when you asked it before, because that's probably the most useful thing I can do. If you're going to ask us a question more than once, all I can do is answer in the same way again. And that is to say I will have to go back and look at the whatever decision
we
I
sent
made.
you a whole
But insofar as you're trying to interrogate my motives, you said why. I think they are the same as the thought processes of the current mayor when he took over and decided or said, I don't know what he really thought, but he said that the Garden Bridge was a great project to rival New York's High Line, and then went on to incur the expenditure of between £9 and £15 million more, £9 and £15 million more of public money, whilst probably all the while meditating pulling the plug on it because it wasn't his project. And, and in the end, not a single penny of taxpayers' money was wasted by the previous mayoral administration. The Garden Bridge would be one. Had we had the good fortune to have been offered the project or to have come up with the project in, say, 2009, 2010, and had a good enough run-up at it, a long enough run-up at it, it would not have been frustrated. And it would be adorning the river now and adding Shan to the connectivity of the North and the South Bank. It would be a sign that London is the greatest city in the world, willing to change, willing to continue to offer fantastic things to visitors.
Secretary, you're in danger of repeating yourself. We'll
I
go
don't
back
see-
to the evidence
so
and the
you-
facts. So, yeah, I'll keep repeating the evidence and the facts, Foreign Secretary, because that's what we're dealing with here in some of the questions that we're asking you. And it's very important that you do come back to us on that MD, because
very
that's
happy.
pretty crucial.
I don't promise
but
to
I
come
would
back
say
in
this,
person.
But I will say this. You
Much
were
rather-
given that MD,
Yes.
and we've given all your MDs because we specifically were going to ask questions around those.
Okay.
But we'll await that news and your thoughts on that last MD. Assembly Member Pigeon.
I want to pick up with you, Foreign Secretary, the lessons learnt from this project. Obviously, £46 million has been spent with nothing to show for it. We've had detailed discussion today and previously many times in this place. With the benefit of hindsight, would you have done anything differently with this project?
Well, I think what I might have done in retrospect, I mean, the obvious thing is I would have tried to get it going faster. If we'd had our time again, I would like, we would have got it, we'd have started it well before the Olympics, we'd have done the planning, done the procurement, got it all done at a decent pace, and then delivered it after and had a good enough period of time to deliver it. The problem is with these things is always political. It's always about You know, have you got enough time to get the permissions, get everybody around it, mobilise public opinion in favour of it? And actually, by the end, I think the Garden Bridge Trust had done a fantastic job, and I paid tribute to Mervyn Davis, to B, to all the team who worked very hard. Loads of people volunteered. The people gave up their time on this project. Public-spirited people loved the idea. I know it became, latterly, it became the sort of favourite thing to bash at fashionable dinner parties. Everybody used to start slagging off. Actually, there were loads of people who loved it, and it would have been a wonderful, wonderful project for London. I'm sad it's not happening. So, regret number one, we should have started earlier. I think, given that we didn't have the run-up that we needed, probably my real regret is just not absolutely eyeballing Sadiq and working out where he was really coming from on this thing. Because I thought, there were moments when I thought he was a true champion of it and really wanted to do it. And that seemed to be reflected by some of the things that he said. But it sort of became clear by the end that there was too much not invented here, and it was just he never really adopted it as something that he wanted to make his own and to be part of his legacy, which it would be. You know, it would be part of, it would be one of, you know, I hesitate to say this, and Mr. Duval, I don't see much else being done right now.
This is not a
I don't see much.
I'm asking you about.
I'm just saying. I don't see much action. I mean, I don't see much investment in the tube. On the contrary, I see tube ridership down 3%. I see a huge black hole in TfL finances. I see house building falling off a cliff. It's true. It's absolutely true.
There will be time to do that in other places.
Yeah, I think I might stand again.
To account for your period of office, where actually it wasn't your greatest moment in this building. So let's go back. Let's go back.
Well,
evidence
hangs heavy on my heart. Look, you're right, Len. You're right. If I think about the Garden Bridge, I feel miserable because I do agree that it should have happened. Or I know the people around this. Not everybody thinks it should have happened, but I feel that we honourably tried to do it. I think it would have been a great. All fantastic infrastructure projects, all great projects are hated by the public at a certain moment in their life cycles. The same is true of the Olympics, which you and many members remember well. People said, scrap the Olympics. People hated the M25 before it was finished. Some people still do hate it. People certainly hate HS2 right now with an absolute poison. People hate things while they're in gestation. They hate any new infrastructure project while it is happening. That's the most difficult moment. That's the moment that requires political courage and leadership and an ability to get on and get things done. And that's what we're not seeing at the moment.
Does it mean that you cut corners or allow others to cut corners to allow us to take those projects? I don't think you do, Foreign Secretary. I don't think you do. There's nothing wrong with having ambitious plans, but they should be done within the procedures you've got. The procedures weren't stopping you achieving a garden bridge. It was actions of others and other issues. And there was an inherent weakness in the proposal. And maybe we should have been upfront with that. There's nothing wrong with being courageous, nothing wrong with being ambitious. It's about the way it was done and achieved to get from some of these points. But let's come on pigeons first, and then we'll give you a chance.
Let's just get back. So one of your regrets is, and almost advice for a future mayor, is that if you're going to start a big project like this, you need to start it early in your administration and really have the focus and energy to get it through. And this should have started earlier if you wanted to deliver it probably in your term of office.
Like Crossrail was almost dead when I came in here. Do you remember? They were going to kill it. They were going to kill it. They were going to kill it, and it's absolutely true. The new coalition administration had identified, because my old friend Ken Clark was then business secretary, and he said, "Why are we going to build this colossal, pointless trench under London?" That was what he said. Colossal, pointless trench under London. And we had to fight like tigers to get that thing off the mortuary slab and get it working again. And you've got people. Killing infrastructure projects is the easiest thing in the world. You look as though you're saving money, and you always regret it.
But let's go back. I want to just focus on the specific project of the Garden Bridge. Do you regret because of the way the process was put in place, that it put TfL and officers there in a very difficult position by pushing them to create a process, rough around the edges as you described earlier, that got you the bridge that you wanted, but actually in some ways put them at risk and process at risk.
I think that's a very thoughtful question and a very good point, because I think it goes to really what Len and others have been driving at this afternoon. Because clearly, when you need to get something done at pace, it does require a great deal of mayoral push to make it happen, and that was true of lots of things that we did, and certainly true of loads of projects. So, you know, the cycle hire scheme, or the new bus for London, or whatever it happens to be. You have to keep saying what's happening. Otherwise, things don't happen. And so that was certainly true of the Garden Bridge. Once we decided to do it, and as I told you, I was a bit lukewarm to begin with. But once we decided to do it, then you've got to gird it like a bull at a gate. Otherwise, it isn't going to happen.
So do you regret that because of the push from your office, officers were put in a place where this is a project that's not in your transport strategy, it's not in the business plan. At some points you didn't even have a mayoral direction on it. You were pushing them to deliver a project, find a procurement process that got you the Garden Bridge almost at whatever cost. And because of that, that's created some of these issues that we've been exploring this afternoon.
Well, yes and no, in the sense that I think it was definitely necessary for me, for us, to be champions and to push and to try to show TfL institutionally that it had a lot of mayoral support. And that actually is more or less how the mayoralty works and how it should work. I was chairman of TfL, and that's actually how this body was constructed. It was constructed around that driving idea, and my predecessor was a good example of how to make that sort of thing work. And to be fair to Ken, you know, he got that point. I don't think though that the way we did it in the end breached the bounds of the proprieties that I know we all want to observe. And you'd expect me to say this, but we've been over it many times now. And if I can just go back to the point about, you know, Michelle Dix, Richard DeCaney, Isabel Dedring, these are fantastic public servants. They did a wonderful job for London. And, you know, I think it really would be a fine thing if somehow, Len, in your findings, you could exonerate them from any of the stuff that's been thrown at them, because it is just not true and it isn't fair.
Just finally, do you have any regrets in terms of supporting this project, or do you at least think that there's proper advice you could give to the current mayor if he had such a project going forward?
I think the most important thing to do is to build the coalition of support, and that is what Crossrail 2 is the classic, is the key thing at the moment. To get something like that done in London, we need every member of the business community to be arguing passionately for Crossrail 2 every time they meet an MP or a minister. You need to build that, and you know, Crossrail. One of the great things about Crossrail in the Olympics was that by the end they'd become depoliticised, and if I, you know, my regret about the Garden Bridge is that it became a political football.
But do you not think by the actions of yourself and others made it more, not party political, but allowed people to make some of those accusations that you reject, that actually you say didn't go on, but the evidence says did, right? The evidence says did. No, your long statement, I kept pointing to this folder we've given you because it's there. There were things that were wrong with this project. There were things that should have been questioned. And very interesting, we're going to give you an opportunity to ask. You've got a plane to catch, Foreign Secretary. There are some other questions I really wanted to ask about just the delivery vehicle around, because I think you have been on record as saying this was an interesting delivery vehicle to deliver projects, the trust concept. Do you stand by that? Have you got any things of that and your thoughts on that?
I think the
TfL officials don't think that. Just want to point that out.
Look, I think for delivery, there is nothing to beat TfL. For delivery in London, you want TfL. That's what you want. For fundraising, you want a great trust with public-spirited people. I think Mervyn Davies did a fantastic job. You know, he really did. He fought and fought and fought, and he could sort of tell. The problem was it was like a bad love affair with Sadiq Khan. You could tell that his heart wasn't really in it, but he didn't kill it, and that was the problem with the whole thing. And so they went on raising money and spending money, and it was really very sad. And frankly, I hope that one day the whole thing is revived, and I think it will be.
Okay, colleagues, I think we've now reached. We've got some. There are some more questions. I think I'll be writing to you, giving you an opportunity to come back.
Thank you.
You've given some commitments. You're going to come back to us on some further things once you've gone and clarified
Thank you so
your own
much.
thinking. Can I thank you for not the way you've answered the questions, but the engagement that's taken place.
Can I kind of say, Len, it's always it's actually lovely to be back here, and much enjoyed our disputations as ever, and I will try to answer some of the points that have been left unclarified. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Put your coat.
Your coach, Foreign Secretary.
I'm going to. It's -12 where I'm going.
Well done.
So in terms of this, I think we will contact members around this table, ask if there are further questions that we want to raise. Equally, I want to just go back and check the transcript about the commitments that the Foreign Secretary has given about giving some of the information. I think we now need to turn our mind to also informally we can take this offline about what whether we do a further report, whether it's you delegate to me in conjunction with party leaders that I do a letter to various people following this exchange and the previous exchanges that we've had in terms of information. Assembly Member Copley.
Yeah, I very much endorse us doing you Chair, writing a letter. I would say I was frustrated that despite the fact that we sent the Foreign Secretary this mountain of evidence, he still seemed to be, appeared to, I don't know if it's feigned or not, ignorant of one of the most important decisions that he took in relation to this project. And, I think in particular we need to pursue him over that point, because that really is where his accountability is. And I think we really need to hold him to account for that.
Okay. Assembly Member Bacon.
Yeah, Chair, I would be supportive of a letter being sent to the Foreign Secretary, and and those points can be covered in it. One thing I would like to put on record here now, I don't know whether, and maybe you can tell me in a moment, whether we gave any indication to Mr. Johnson what kind of questions would be asked. Mr. Copley, Assemblymember Copley, was pursuing him very hard on the deed question, which is perfectly fine, as well within his rights. That folder is very, very thick, if that's what was sent to him. That's fine, but we do have to bear in mind, of course, that he is the Foreign Secretary. And, it doesn't mean that he's got acres of time to spend preparing for a London Assembly meeting. So I think we do need to consider some of these questions in a certain amount of context.
I have been told that he did prepare very well for this, and he had a team supporting him in his preparation. We gave him the headings that we were going to raise questions on, and I think in terms of the headings of the deed of grant, they're all related to the mayoral direction sheets that he should be very familiar with, and they were supplied to him both electronically at the early stages and in the last 10 days the folder. So
Was it made
it's
clear,
not,
Chairman,
it's
that
not that
that
we've
was a question that was going to be asked?
But
and
I
that was
think
going to be the point of the
he
meeting.
was always going to be asked about mayoral direction.
You think that, but
No,
would you?
he does think that. He knew.
He does
His
think
team
There aren't
knew
so
that.
many
didn't
you
appear to
wouldn't
think
remember
Well,
or be
that's,
able to
I think, the nature of the beast.
revise them.
Assembly Member Pidgey.
Yeah, I think I support writing, obviously, to the Foreign Secretary for clarification on some further points, but I think then from there it might be for you as Chair to write both to TfL and the Mayor with any further lessons learned, so there's learning from this for future projects.
I think we look at the transcript, go through. Of course, members are open to talk to me direct about that, and then we will work out a way forward that we would collectively agree.
Okay.
List there not being any other contributions, I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
GLA Chamber Sound.